Good morning, class. My name is Mark Boydelo. Fact: if every single person on the planet were to live the same quality of life as your average American, the Earth would need to be 5 times its current size. Resource management is a very big issue in the up-and-coming global economy and just people at large. As an engineering major, I understand the need to use the scientific method to come up with conclusions, weigh the pros and cons of different processes that are new and inventive, but to also sort of step back and realize that there are limits as well as potentials with any new process. This brings me to my main point. Genetically modified organisms are necessary if we are to combat the growing problems of population explosion and malnourishment, and in general dealing with the fact that we have a growing population and we only have a very small amount of resources that are finite. Since the agricultural revolution, humanity has been modifying crops. This was built on the unnatural concept of harvesting and growing foods independent of hunting and gathering. Humans have been selectively breeding crops, and they've done this for a lot of different reasons. They've done it for durability, for increased yields, basically so we can eat more. If we have more food, we can have a bigger population. If we can have a bigger population, then everyone can have a higher quality of life. Genetically modified organisms are essentially the same thing, but just more scientifically precise. I will begin by looking at the sustainability and malnourishment globally to give a context of how GMOs can be useful. GMOs are genetically modified organisms, and I've been talking a little bit about sustainability. And you heard me earlier speak about a human population. 7 billion people here, consuming as much as the average American. You need 5 Earths, like the same resources that we enjoy on a daily basis. You need 5 times as much of that for everyone on the planet to enjoy the same quality of life that we had when we got up this morning to come to school. Additionally, each person uses about 20 acres of biologically available land. That's just an American alone, and Americans are approximately 350 million out of 7 billion people. According to goldenrice.org, which is it's a watchdog organization that specializes in looking at practical solution to malnourishment, specifically putting beta-carotene in rice for underdeveloped countries. They estimate that 670,000 children die of vitamin A deficiency, and an additional 350,000 go blind. In the Philippines alone, there's about 1.7 million children from 6 months to 5 years, and 3 out of 10 school children with vitamin A deficiency. Additionally, 1 out of 5 pregnant women and lactating mothers also suffer from vitamin A deficiency. Now, there's an interesting fact that approximately 9% of our corn, soy, and cotton grown in the U.S. is genetically modified. Now, there are a lot of issues surrounding this. People like to say that you have issues with GMOs becoming superweeds, but one of the issues is that according to I forget offhand what the name is, but there's approximately over 1,600 listed invasive species. Now, what this means is that there are a whole bunch of crops, like outside plants and stuff, that came over to the United States and cross-pollinated naturally with the surrounding environment. And now these are considered invasive species that have a lot of destructive characteristics. Now, 4 studies done on GMOs came to wildly different conclusions. But the bottom line is that the Union of Concerned Scientists says that you have to consider GMOs on a case-by-case basis. You can't say that one particular crop is the most evil ever and then blacklist genetically modified organisms. You have to really study each individual thing scientifically. In 1944, for instance, the biologist Norman Bradley spent 30 years hand-crossing strands of wheat in Mexico. And the result was that he came up with a 6-fold productivity over traditional variants. What this created was a food surplus. And in Mexico at the time, people were starving. And it went from food famine or food deficit to food surplus. Now let's go back to golden rice. In 1999, this golden rice was implemented that had beta-carotene that, if given to local populations that are malnourished, would give them enough vitamin A to not go blind and not die from lack of vitamin A deficiency. The U.S. was one of the few countries that actually allowed for this testing because it's one of the few countries that trials can be conducted after complying with acceptable regulatory standards. If humanity refuses to acknowledge the benefit of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and continues consumption at its current rate, the future in fact looks bleak. As we can see here, there's already been a history of pre-genetically modified organisms. For instance, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, collard, and cauliflower come from one exact plant that was specifically bred to create all these. Like I said, there's that biologist who had that 6-fold increase in productivity. Now, according to goldenrice.org, if we don't acknowledge the importance of GMOs, we're going to have a tough time managing resource consumption. Because like I mentioned earlier, arable land and desertification are problems. Now I didn't really mention too much about desertification, but what it is just the process of deserts that are expanding over a period of time due to over-harvesting. Now, let's revisit our main points and close with a quick summary. We need to acknowledge the potential benefits of genetically modified organisms on a global scale so humanity can adequately address the problems of a growing human population faced with dwindling resources. Even if we don't agree on the consensus of GMOs in the first world nations, we shouldn't punish impoverished nations that have large malnourished populations because of strict regulatory standards that people in the first world nation who are afforded basic luxuries and high quality of living automatically enjoy. Thank you.